to the committee William Scotty from Scotty Scott and Company, and Peter Lempin, the Executive Vice President of the partnership. I begin by saying Happy New Year to everybody. It's good to see you all again. I'm sorry I'm not getting to see the chair. Please extend my hellos to him as well. I know we're first up, and I know you have quite an agenda ahead of you today. So I will just begin by saying I hope that you've all received a copy of our fiscal year 14 financials. As you can see from even a very quick review, it was a good year for us financially and programmatically. As you know, GCP in this reporting year celebrated its 25th year of providing services to the Midtown East community that we represent as a bid. We also had another year where we did not seek an assessment increase, which actually up until this point in time, we've only sought 3 assessment increases in the past 17 years. We ended the year with the ability to add about $800,000 to our reserve, bringing our overall reserve to $4.4 million. 400 million of that is 400, bringing our reserve to 4.4 million. 400,000 of that is earmarked for a capital project that we're working with Metro North and the MTA on. Is, believe it or not, part of the Centennial Legacy, which of course is now 2 years ago, but we are still in the process, and the project is actually underway. We're very excited about that, which involves lighting and physical signage improvements to the Park Avenue Viaduct and the front of Grand Central Terminal. Our regular services, as you know, public safety, sanitation, tourism, and business and retail assistance, as well as capital projects and maintenance, are ongoing. I can tell you, in addition to the good news about the reserve and the increase in the reserve, the only really other significant and positive fiscal accomplishment of the year, which is reflected in these financials, is the fact that we did a refinancing of our bonds. As you know, they were originally issued in 1992, and we have done, in 1994 they were refinanced, in 2004 they were refinanced, and again in December of 13. Overall, this most recent refinancing, which was done in consultation and in partnership with the Office of the Comptroller, the Law Department, the Mayor's Office, directly, as well as the Department of Small Business Services, is resulting in about a $1.8 million savings for us through the remaining life of the bonds, which is in 2022, which when I first got to GCP seemed like a million years from now, but as we prepare our fiscal year 16 budget, doesn't seem so far away anymore. The 2 last refinances that we've done for, and this most recent one, results in a little over $3 million in savings over the life of the bonds during that period. So that's really the sort of overall or sort of overview of the story. If you have obviously any questions that grow out of the document, please feel free. One of us will be able to handle them.
Anybody? I think it's very straightforward.
Yes.
And I congratulate you on being in the business of making money, financing your debt, refinancing your debt.
Yes. Well, as you know, that money went. And actually in the era that we're looking at now, where East Midtown is the focus of interesting discussion and debate about its future in terms of development, the idea of public realm is really at the forefront, in addition to height and bulk and density and all of the different things that different stakeholders in our community are concerned about. The reality is that the partnership was really the creator of the public realm and the change in public realm and what that can mean. And the bonds really enabled us to do that. by, creating the signature streetlights and the organization on the street, the granite corners, the news boxes, things that people have become used to, the planters and the beautification elements. So we couldn't have done it without it, or it would have taken a long time to accomplish it. In some cases, we're in the third generation of assets, but it really has brought us to the table because people see the partnership as being understanding the world of public realm and the experience for people, that the business is not just about doing the business, but it's about the experience you provide the people who work and live and visit the neighborhood. So we're really happy about it. We're happy we're close to being done with the payments, but we're constantly looking at ways to improve. So we hope that this current year, that we're already halfway through, and the years to come will enable us to think of new things to do in a new way, in a cost-effective way.
Any comments from other members of the committee? Yes, not. Thank you.
Thank you
As
so
somebody
much.
who likes to work regularly, thank you.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank
and
you.
please
Send
again
our
extend our
regards
regards
to
to the chair. Thank you.
Okay. Who we do next?
34th Street.
34th Street, yeah. That should be 14th. Grand. Good morning.
Morning. Peter Sorello, Chief Financial Officer, 34th Street Partnership, and
Charlene Lineski, KPMG, the auditor.
Okay, well, do you want to tell us a little bit first, or should we?
you can start right in.
I think in the interest, we're lacking the regular chairman. It seems to me fairly straightforward, that
It was, it was
looks to me
pretty
like an extension of last year.
correct. It was.
One of my pets is you forgot to capitalize the D in the city, and I'll forgive you for that. Now, there is something in the statement that I found a little perplexing. If you go to 2I, it refers to fair value considered level 3 in the fair value hierarchy. You go to page 10, and you talk about level 2, and there's no, I'm not sure I understand the relationship between the two references.
You don't have, you actually don't have at 34th Street any level 3 unobservable inputs.
Okay,
It's
so,
just the policy, and the bonds are considered level 2 within the hierarchy.
so then probably you shouldn't mention it, huh?
It's just a standard accounting policy to represent
That you-
the 3 levels.
Okay. I never win that argument. Standard accounting policy.
Is that just a requirement that you describe all 3 levels even if you only have one? I don't recall that.
It's our requirement of what we put in. We can
First
certainly, as you go forward, we could put there are none, if that makes it
Well,
clarification.
it makes it would make it clear, more clearer.
Sure.
I had this fight with a number of your confreres in the business, and I've yet to win, but I try. All right.
Not a worry.
Anybody else have any questions? This is very straightforward. We don't mean to cut you short, but it's,
Did the auditors have any comments?
any comments? No? Well, one thing I always ask in the private sector, you have a hotline?
Yes, a whistleblowing.
A whistleblower, yes.
Yeah. And have you had any in the interval between this year and last?
No, we have not.
That's good. That's a sort of standard question, as you know. Anybody else? Sorry, we can't keep you busy longer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You know, we might give some thought, when you have something this straightforward, why we bring them in? Why we bring these folks in?
Well, that's up to you guys, but the policy has been that that these large ones that had debt outstanding
No, I appreciate that, but all right.
We have to, I mean, we whittled it down, so we had everybody coming in, and
I remember
so now maybe we want to revisit our threshold,
either that or we examine the documents and then we decide whether we
and
need
make a
to do
determination.
So straightforward. Okay. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Maldonado. I am the CEO and Executive Director of the Educational Construction Fund.
Jim Filipnevo, from Israel of Tratner, the outside auditors.
Cynthia Wong, Deputy Director of Finance.
Okay. Well, why don't you make a preliminary statement if you're
Yes.
prepared to, and then
Yes.
we'll.
Correct. So we're very happy to report that the fund did very well this year. We increased by approximately 0.1 million, I'm sorry, and 3.7 million between 2013 and 2014. Our revenues increased this year. We were able to execute the second amendment of our ground lease at our project at 250 East 57th Street. And with that execution of the second amendment, which was an extension of the lease from 75 years to 99 years, there was an additional payment of 7 million, so that was helpful to the fund. We expect to develop 1 to 2 more projects this year. That obviously will not hit our revenues until years to come, but this is a good income stream, and we've gotten a large amount of support from the mayor's office to continue with the mission of ECF, so we anticipate that if things work the way we want them to work in the next 2 to 3 years, we'll see a little more frequency of these projects. The projects traditionally have been 5 years at a clip. We anticipate that we'll be able to work a little more rapidly in the upcoming years. So, Jim, if you have anything on the accounting side?
Yeah, I think she pretty much covered the revenue side and how that went up, and the expenses on the financial statement increased by a lot because the interest capitalization that was done in prior years was no longer being done. So that almost $9 million of interest expense increased this year because of that. And I think the only other thing was that the city implemented the new GASBs last year for the pension reporting, and ECF was not able to because they're in the state pension plan, and the state was not implementing it till this year when it's actually required by the GASB. So ECF will be implementing that with the year ending in June of this year.
Okay. Anything else you want to tell us? The chairman has arrived.
Yeah, not even.
We ran it efficiently, Bernie.
I couldn't make it sooner.
All right.
Perhaps while
Hi,
the chairman
Jackie.
is
How you
getting
doing?
settled, I can ask you a question. I think in the past, this committee might have suggested that you include as other supplementary information the rate of your project.
Yes, I'm sorry, we neglected to do that this year, but we will
It
going
would be
forward.
great. I
Yes,
mean, I think
yes.
you've done some wonderful projects that would be great.
What are we up to
Bring it
do?
out.
100%, and that was a fault on ours.
So in your MD&A, you show year-to-year comparisons for fiscal 14 and 13, but you should also show fiscal 12 numbers and then describe the changes in the prior year's financial statements also for comparative purposes.
Will do.
Thanks.
I had another question.
Yes.
On page 6, under the results of operations, you make a statement in the first text sentence, rental and tax equivalency income increased from 14 due to the second amendment of the 250 East 57th Street site as discussed previously. But then when I look in the tables and the year-over-year tables, financial statements, it looks like they're declining. Like if I look at page 13, revenues for the year ended June 30th, 14. The rental income and tax equivalency payments are lower than they are on the next page for the prior year. So I'm just trying to reconcile the statement with what's appearing in the tables, and it's really also a large part of the operating revenue decline you also see on page 6. It's not, there's investment income, but largely it's rental income and tax equivalency payments.
The statement is on page 6, you said, and which tables are you referring to?
I'm looking at page 13 and 14. Revenues.
You can also see it in your statements of activities on page 9.
So the statement said rental and tax equivalency income decreased in 13 by 5
No,
million.
the statement says rental and tax
What's
equivalency
the sentence
income.
above? He's talking about the sentence above it. He's
Okay.
talking about for 14's activity. In the MD&A, you're
Increased in
saying for
14.
14, it's increased from prior year, when the financial statements are showing a decrease.
So that
I
statement,
think that statement was including that other income of 7 million, which came with the, the amendment to the lease.
So maybe it shouldn't be referred to as rental and tax equivalency income?
Okay.
Well.
or it would be rental and tax equivalency income plus the other revenues.
It says other income here. If you look at 13, it is listed as other income, the 7 million.
I know, but I guess my point was that the statement which says rental and tax equivalency income increased in 14
Oh, I see what
doesn't
you're
make
saying.
reference to the additional 7 million, which may, if you include that, result in an increase in 14 over 13, but the statement as it reads is,
The statement is speaking of all your revenue,
I understand.
not just that one type.
Okay,
Revenue.
understood.
If you don't mind, go back to page 6.
Yes.
You got some amusing words here. You say rental tax equivalent income increased due to the Second Amendment of the site.
Correct.
It's not an amendment of the site, is it?
It was the Second Amendment of the ground lease of the site, correct?
Okay.
Correct, I see where the,
And then they're talking, you say something, G&A, this is the same point everybody else is making, so it's there. Then, in the preceding sentence, you say general and administrative expenses increased due to depreciation expense. Is that implying there wasn't any depreciation before? It's an increased depreciation.
general administrative expenses increased.
Could you say that last again?
If you look at the paragraph that begins rental and tax equivalency on page 6, there's a sentence that says G&A increased due to depreciation expense. No, sorry, the preceding G&A increased in 14 due to depreciation expense. That implies there wasn't any before? Or was it an increase in depreciation?
It increased in 14.
I think you need the word increased in there, otherwise it's not clear.
Okay.
Isn't it changed?
Expenses increased, I guess we should say due to an increase in depreciation expense.
Okay.
Then you have some odd language on page 7. The fund's current development activities may be summarized as follows. And then you have the fund anticipates. It's a little awkward. And then you're missing a dollar sign. That's a big thing in the next paragraph. But
Oh,
before
7 million. See
7
it?
million.
See it right here.
Oh, okay.
Good catches.
So,
Go ahead. Oh, the
Sorry.
chairman has arrived, so I will bow out of this role.
I'm sorry I'm late. I missed you sold the Norman Thomas High School site,
Correct, in 2013, that was
and the revenue
increased,
came in 2013. You recognized the revenue?
correct.
I see.
right, where is it?
We just.
And what about the Norman, what about the Murray Bertram site?
That was sold in,
That was also sold.
so that was sold in 2010 or 11. I'd have to go back to my records.
Okay.
It precedes me a bit.
All right.
If you don't mind, will you turn to footnote 2, cash equivalents? There's something not quite right there. You say cash and cash
Give her the
equivalents.
page, Mark.
Page 18. Cash and cash equivalents consist of unrestricted money market funds. I don't know what unrestricted money market funds are in the first place. I don't know what that is. They're either money market funds or there's something else. And then it says cash equivalents are normally held to maturity. Now, if you're holding them in money market funds, there is no maturity in there. The portfolio has a maturity, but your investment in the portfolio is a security that you can get in and out of any time you want. So this description is not quite the way.
Okay, we will make that change and make it much clearer.
I guess the unrestricted probably belongs at the very beginning of that sentence. Unrestricted cash and cash equivalents.
Cash equivalency, right.
Yeah, something like that.
We will clarify that.
So in your statement of net position, your advanced rental receipts went down quite a bit from 13.
Can you tell me what page you're looking at?
Page 8.
8.
It refers to note 2, but note 2 doesn't really give any explanation outside of a definition of what advanced rental receipts are. It might be worth noting why they've decreased so much in the MD&A, perhaps.
Okay, that was due to the loss in our revenue due to the sale of our property, the Norman Thomas property, but we will clarify that.
Yeah, whenever there's big shifts, just maybe make mention of it either in the footnotes or in the MD&A.
Understood.
Thanks.
Probably MD&A is the better place.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, if you turn to page 19, first paragraph, buildings are carried at cost and depreciation expense is calculated. So if you have depreciation, how can you carry the buildings at cost? I assume buildings are carried at depreciated cost.
Well, yeah, I guess the cost part is carried at cost and then they're depreciated.
Well, I guess that the language is,
Awkward.
there's one other thing I don't understand. Page 22, you refer to Bank of New York Chase Investment Surplus. Those are two different banks. How did they have something? How do you have?
Bank of New York Chase.
Fierce competitors in two different banks. I don't
We
understand.
have some of our money in the Chase accounts and some in Bank of New York.
I'm sorry, miss?
We have some of our funds with Bank of New York and some of our funds with Chase.
Well, from a
But it's
discovery.
an and sign, right, rather than a slash.
Okay, so instead of the slash, we put and.
That would help.
Okay, thank you.
And on page 23, you've got an interesting first sentence. Custodial credit risk for deposits when in the event of a depository, a government may, you talk about yourself or generically? Because you're not a government.
No, but we're backed by the New York City government, so.
Oh, no, I understand that.
No, I
But
don't
you're
think
me.
you are. I think you're bankruptcy remote from the city.
Pardon?
I think you are bankruptcy remote.
We
from
are
the city,
bankruptcy
so
remote,
you're
but I
not
mean in
backed by
terms
the
of
city.
our
No, but
credit
your
rating,
language,
our
your
credit-
language
I
is
think that
inapposite.
that was actually copied
Credit
right out of the
rating.
GASB standard as opposed to being appropriately modified for your footnote.
Oh, understood.
You got that twice in the same paragraph. I figured that was what happened. Bernie, I don't have anything else other than a bunch of typos, which I'll get to.
No, no, I didn't always give it that. I think I've always asked this. You had 17 schools,
18 projects, correct.
I'm sorry,
18 projects, correct.
8, not 17, 18?
18 projects,
18,
correct.
all right, you say so. And how many, and you've sold,
2,
so you still have 16
Correct.
that you're managing?
correct.
Yeah, I think in the past you brought a schedule, which I guess you carry in an annual report, showing the schools, showing the income. I mean, you're doing much more than 57th Street, right? And you may as well take credit for it. So that's my only point. I don't mean to sound critical, because
No.
you deserve the credit for what you've done, and you've met your obligations. The city never had to kick in for anything, right? So,
Correct.
yeah, you know, you're entitled to the credit by getting that, showing us that schedule. Maybe it should be a footnote, maybe a separate deliverable, whatever you think.
Okay,
I'm sure at your board meetings, you
correct, we do
you
have that.
use, yeah,
Yes,
sure,
we do
sure.
have that.
While Bernie's flipping, may I ask you, go to page 34, the discussion about, first of all, in the second paragraph, tax equivalent, you say tax equivalent, the actions may be pending. Then you say the results of these actions, either they are pending or they're not. And if they are pending, if they may be pending, how can you have a statement?
Tax equivalent actions may be pending, the result of these actions.
Are they pending?
Cannot be determined in accordingly. Well, I think tax equivalency is determined each year, so they are pending each year.
Well,
Saying the adjustments are
The
pending.
adjustments are pending, correct?
Adjustments are pending. But you have a history of those adjustments, right?
Yes, we do.
And so theoretically, you could estimate a annual adjustment amount. And it wouldn't be on a, it wouldn't be
no, I'll
specific.
get to that.
We adjust every 6 months,
Huh?
because that's how finance delivers its
It's just a little confusing the way
estimates
you
for
have it
us. We adjust, but you're right, we can make an adjustment, or we can make an approximation every year.
So when you say cannot be determined and accordingly no provisions have been made, you could say it could be estimated, and, you know, the provisions we've made based on that estimated are such and such.
Okay.
While you're fooling with that, I had some trouble with litigation and crane accident. in
Yes.
The way it's described.
Yes.
The last paragraph on the page says, the fund will incur losses in excess of available insurance coverage, but you also have coverage from the contractor. And the first claim presumably is against the contractor and its
Correct.
policy.
Correct.
And then your insurance coverage would only kick in.
After that, after
So
the construction.
This doesn't deal with that
Wait,
kind
I'm
of.
sorry, could you point me to?
Last paragraph.
Last paragraph.
I would hope that there's no excess of the liability of the carrier, of the contractor and its carrier, something like that.
Okay.
The middle school 114 was where again? That was the First Avenue?
91st Street and First Avenue, correct.
That was where the accident happened?
Correct, correct. And as of, correct me, Cynthia, I think as of last week, all claims have been settled, I believe. I believe all claims have been settled, so that'll be reflected next year.
Sorry?
All claims have been settled as of last week, so that'll be reflected in our next year's
Oh, it's
statement.
been settled?
Correct. We just received notification
I
late,
think-
we just received notification late last week, so that'll be reflected in next year's.
And the developer's insurance covered it?
Correct,
Oh, very
correct.
good.
So we were very lucky with that.
Will not mean an increase in your premiums.
Exactly, exactly.
I'm done, Bernie.
Yeah, no, the rest.
But we will make these fixes, obviously, and we will take more credit,
No.
hopefully as well,
No
for the
debits
work
for
that we do.
credits, huh?
Exactly.
Just for the record, I don't think it was luck. I think
No,
you
I-
planned to make sure that you contractors have appropriate insurance.
No, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how we go into every one of our deals.
I'll give you this so you can.
Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
There is no management comments, so we can move
No.
on.
Thank you very
Are
much.
there any other questions?
Oops, I knew I'd sink that basket.
Table's too wide.
Yeah, really.
Wait a minute, there must be, here. No.
I think.
I'm too short. Somebody
So the short guy,
I couldn't have done a worse job.
Thank you.
It's hardly worth it.
I was
Thanks.
gonna,
Mark was trying to, he just couldn't bend
Thank
over.
you. Thank you. Blaming you.
you notice I didn't move, so.
Yeah, well, you're not much of a gentleman, Jim.
That's why you're a senior partner.
That's not how I get my brownie points. I was liberated by my mom. Feminist way.
I'm a feminist, but it doesn't allow for people being.
I try not to be
Have
right.
a seat, please. Just very quickly,
That's the thing.
That's something.
there were minutes, there were minutes at the meeting of October. Yeah, I'm saying of October 22nd, and then we had to have a subsequent meeting 2 days later before we could vote on the acceptance of the financials. They're really all pro forma. I think just for the record, we have to have them approved.
I move.
Second? Any objection? Okay. That's done.
The minutes of both of those meetings.
I'm sorry,
The
Dick?
minutes of both of those meetings are now approved.
Yeah, you had to have, yeah, you had to get it. Okay, good morning, Ms. Avery.
Good morning, how are you?
And your staff. And you're from PricewaterhouseCoopers?
Correct, yes.
A nice set of statements. I like your description on the new pension requirements on Gatsby. You went into some detail. I thought it was a good job.
Thank you. It was a lot of effort by all.
Yeah. Do you have anything you will state?
Maybe everyone can introduce themselves first?
Yeah, sure. So, good morning. I'm Marianne Agri. I'm the Vice President of Finance and Information Technology at the New York City School Construction Authority. With me is John Hepburn, our Controller at the School Construction Authority. And from Pricewaterhouse, David Menbaum and Diana Cunha. So, just real quickly, just to give you an overview of our operations. So FY 2014 was the 5th year of our 5th five-year plan. And our total appropriations for that plan was $11.24 billion. And last year, for 2014, we committed $2.2 billion. And that included $604 million for construction contracts for 17 schools, as well as $752 million in construction contracts for 459 capital improvement projects. We also completed 11 schools and created 5,000 new seats in fiscal 14. So for fiscal 15, just to give you a sense of what we're doing now, we'll be opening 19 new schools, which creates 10,552 seats, and also 23 pre-K facilities will be opening. And currently in construction, we have 55 capacity projects and approximately 585 capital improvement projects. So that's just
Big numbers.
So 15, so there's a new 5-year plan covering 15 to 19, is that it?
yes, it goes, yes, exactly, 15 to 19.
And
And that's 13.4 billion.
So you have an increase, okay.
Yes.
As I recall, you're a pretty significant portion of the city's capital budget. No, I mean, just remember the facts, am I right, Michelle? The statements seem quite, as I say, very, very complete. I always ask the question, how do the change orders go on these projects? Now, that's bad English. How large, how big, how do you get through them, and so on and so forth?
So we pretty much budget, a 10% number for change orders, and we generally fall within that budget. So some of them might be above, some of them might be below, but we, pretty much are on track in terms of our change orders. They're not, they stay within the range.
And the general contractor has to ride herd on the subcontractors, I
Right.
guess.
Right.
You have to ride her, the general contractor, yeah. Otherwise, it runs out of control, I think. But that statistic of 10% has worked pretty well all these years, Ms. Agri.
Yes, it has. And we look at it, we pretty much look at it every year because we have to for budgeting purposes, and it pretty much stays around there.
And the contractors, the general contractors, I guess, everything is done on public bids and what have you.
Right, so we're governed by the public authority law in terms of how we do all of our, everything's, yeah, we have a public bidding process that's all established in our procedures.
You don't have to worry about the subcontractors, that's the headache of the contract.
Right, our contracts are just with the general contractors.
Otherwise, you'd never, go ahead.
Follow up on Bernie's point about the change orders. Who has the authority to order change orders?
Well, there's a whole process where the GC will, or the contractor will put in for a change order, and then there's a huge review process that involves our architects and engineers determining what kind of a change order it is, and then depending on the amount of the change order, there's a chain of command.
Oh, it's coming from the bottom up rather than the top down.
Well, there are if there's some design change or whatever, it could come from us. We might direct them to do something else, so it could be both ways, yeah.
The funds flow from the city for you to pay the contractors, is that it?
Yes.
And they're responsible for paying the subcontractors, okay.
Right.
And I remember at one point you do have people out in the field inspecting the construction projects?
Oh, yeah, we have an inspection division, inspection division. We actually act as the buildings department, so we have that whole function at the SCA.
And you still have some in-house mechanics as well, don't you? Or
No, we have in-house design and architecture and engineering staff.
Okay. From the old Bureau of School Buildings, I guess, it's a hangover?
Some of them are from there, and then from the outside as well. We're hired up over time.
I have a question for Price Waterhouse. In your other matters, there's something missing, I think. It says the accompanying, identify accompanying.
What page one?
Page 2. I couldn't make sense of that sentence. Is there an executive?
There's an extra accompanying.
That's what it is, isn't it? Okay.
Correct, yep.
How often you find that in the county?
So once the projects are completed, Ms. Agri, you turn them over to the Board of Ed, to the, I'm sorry, the Department of Education.
Right, right.
And then you're also involved in some special renovations on their behalf if they order them or whatnot?
So we do, well, we do all the capital improvement projects to all of the schools.
Okay, if it's a capital improvement.
Right, we don't do expense work.
Okay, okay. I think it's working considering how many schools, how many seats you're developing over the years.
Yes.
Over the 5-year plan, what would you say you developed about?
I'm not sure what that number is this past 5 years.
There's got to be a couple of, quite a few thousand.
Yeah, thousands, yeah.
About, yeah.
I'm interested to see that you have an audit advisory committee that you refer to here.
I'm sorry?
You said, I'm sorry, in the management. Yeah.
So we have an audit advisory committee right this instant. We're working with City Hall with the new administration to identify new members.
No, I'm amused because I was instrumental in setting up the Audit Advisory Committee to the old Board of Ed.
Okay.
And this looks like a hangover.
Well, we have an internal audit program as well. So we have Ernst & Young that is on staff to do our internal audit program.
And do you have an audit committee of your own?
Well, no, that's what
That's what this would
That's
be.
the audit committee of our own. We have one, but we're working with City Hall to get some new members. Are you interested? No.
Did that for 13 years.
Ernst & Young, I think, also provides some services for the Department of Education, or you?
Yes. I believe they also do internal
Yeah.
audit for the department.
So they do internal audit for you and internal?
But
audit-
ours is a separate contract.
No,
Yeah,
of course, it'd have to be. And somewhere you spoke about insurance, I think it was on page 16. So Liberty Mutual is your general liability insurance?
General, Liberty Mutual was our workers' comp and general liability carrier. They will no longer bid in the city. Our current provider is ACE.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what it says.
And I guess in the, if you're in the construction business, there's going to be lawsuits, people will complain. I see you go into a whole paragraph like the other agency. All right. But nothing that serious, it looks like.
We've been fortunate enough not to have any serious claims.
No, that's good. That's fine. That's fine.
Do you have your own internal counsel, or do you rely on city court counsel as?
Well, we have our own internal counsel, but they work with the city's council as well.
I really mean it. And your employees are all members of the city pension funds, for the most part,
Most part.
part of that retirement system, and then you point out some of the nicest.
Right.
Okay,
Maybe on that note, Bernie, I can just mention that at the close this year, there was some difficulty in regard to the implementation of the new GASB standards. And SCA, as a member of the city's pension plans, was also very affected by that, as the city was. And I will say it seemed to be a difficulty for SCA, maybe above and beyond for other entities. And I just want to offer the Controller's Office assistance going forward if you need anything, so that hopefully it can go a little smoother.
Yes, I've already had a conversation with the committee secretary about setting up a meeting to kind of talk about how we go through next year. And I will also probably reach out to the actuary.
Thank you.
See you next week.
Next week. I'll be there. I don't, oh, there's nothing. A bunch of little typos.
Do you want to move on to management letters?
And on the post-employment benefits, you have to carry the liability, but you have the pay-go. They get
we
their,
have pay-as-you-go.
once they leave, it's on a cash basis, just like the city does. All right. I don't see any more problems.
Actually, the city has a trust fund.
I'm sorry?
The city does have an other post-employment benefit trust fund.
Very little though,
Yes,
given the
but-
size. All right,
but
at
it's
least
not completely paid.
that's a little bit of a reserve, yeah. No, I really have no problem. I guess I sometimes wonder, and it's not an accounting question, I guess it's an operating question. So when the school gets turned over to the Department of Education, are there meetings with the custodians? Because they're pretty important people, I gather, and so that they know how to operate the heating systems.
Right, yes, there are, training manuals that the contractor has to give, and then there's a turnover process with the Department of Education, yes. With the old Division of School Facilities,
Of the Department of
Yes.
Education, I see. And once they accept it, they accept it.
right.
They can reject if it came down to it, or it doesn't sound like that would happen?
Well, I mean, sometimes there's back and forth, but
Eventually, there's an agreement.
right. Because the schools, I mean, they have to open the schools a certain date, so once
Yes,
they
of
open,
course.
yeah.
All right. I have no more questions. Anybody?
Are we, does
We
that
have,
include the management
we
letter?
have, we have to, yes, we have two I think there were two observations.
I had a question, if I could, regarding the first significant deficiency identified. You say that this had no impact on the cash flow for the authority, but it does sound like these would be errors in the financial statements unless they had been corrected for. Had they been corrected for?
They were corrected. They are in the financials. They are covered in the financials. It's the process of identifying it. As we went through looking at the actuarial report, both on the side and SCI side, there were additional questions that came up due to how complicated the insurance program is. And so there were some things that were not identified early on in the process. What we are going to do is we're fixing that, and we're using the services of Ernst & Young to assist in better evaluating that report and the loss history.
And they're bringing in insurance experts to help you
Yes.
specifically? Thank you.
That was where, I guess that relates to the fact that it's no longer Liberty Mutual, it's ACE.
It's ACE, and it was a carriers in New York that will write insurance. We were limited to actually ACE and AIG were the only two firms that submitted proposals. And because of the scaffolding law in New York, which puts absolute liability on the contractor or owner of the project, the costs have just been escalating over the last couple of years.
It's good that you found carriers that'll take the risk. I mean, you couldn't operate without it.
I'm sorry, but if it's okay, I'd like to go back for a moment to your discussion of your audit committee. If your audit committee has not been reconstituted yet, was there any audit committee review of these financial statements this year, or not?
No.
No. Okay, so to whom did Price Waterhouse make their required disclosures?
He should answer it to you.
To SCA management.
Are you not required to make it above management to a board or an audit committee?
Well, according to the SCA charter, right, the advisory committee is a recommended committee, not a required committee. So when we talked to council at the SCA, they were sure that was the fact. So we communicated with management.
Okay. I would like to suggest, it's not a rule, that there are a couple of other entities that don't have audit committees that come before this committee, and if they haven't had an audit committee meeting for some reason, or they don't have an audit committee, they make their required communications to us, so that it's not just to management. So going forward, if your hopefully your audit committee will be reconstituted before this close. But if for some reason that's not the case, please
Sure. Okay.
try to do that here.
The information technology comments, I think you agreed
Yes,
with management. Management agreed, and,
yes, both of the items we're
oh, yeah, you're in
doing.
total agreement, all right. Any other questions, any members of the committee? Thank you again, Ms. Agri, and thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I do want to thank everyone, in dealing with the year and difficulties with pensions. People really did come together and get
Thank you.
cleared up
Thank
quickly. Thanks.
This was the SCA's 25th anniversary.
Hey!
Sorry.
No.
Sorry?
The SCA's 25th anniversary.
Mazel tov.
SCA.
You already have a big party?
Well,
I remember the old.
did it as part of our holiday party.
I remember the old Bureau School buildings. We've been around, I've been around a long time.
I've been around a long time.
No, no, not.
Thank you. Take care.
We have the management letters now.
We have the Department of Education first.
What?
We have the Department of Education on their
The
management letter
management letter
first.
first,
And then
okay.
we'll do the cities.
I see the, thank you very much. You ought to do it for some of the others. They look down and they talk, okay. You want to introduce a little bit yourself and some of the other people?
Actually, Suzette's going to be handling it this year.
This is part of my professional development.
I'm sorry?
This is part of my professional development.
Our administrator of accounting, Suzette Edmonds-Irish.
Good morning, good morning. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the audit committee for giving us the opportunity to present our report to management for FY14. Okay. So we are just going to go through the comments in order, not unless anyone prefers different.
Do it the way you want, ma'am. You have the floor.
Okay. So today we have with us our technology team. We have Bill Goban, Robert Parlato, and Desmond White. And finance team, we have myself, John Wall, Marisol Williams, and Margaret Woodtaker. All right, so our first comments are on the technology side. So I'm going to defer to Bill Goban for those.
The one that goes into famous CPS, that's the one you mean, the one that goes through all the applications? Go ahead,
Through all the
sir.
applications, that's correct. So there were a couple of findings of users who were no longer active within the DOE were not being removed, the system access to the systems. Although we had generated some reports that were manually being reviewed, we realized that wasn't the most efficient way to do things. So we're going to basically automate that process. So anytime a person is no longer active at the DOE, we'll automatically remove them from those applications so they have no longer access to these systems. And likewise, there was a request to do a quarterly review of those to make sure nobody else sneaked back in. So we'll facilitate that too and set up an automatic process to make sure nobody regained access to any of these systems. We should have that done by June of 2015.
Yes, yes. The authorization of application changes,
That's also.
That's mine also. Yes, we made it clear to all resources within the department that they are not to proceed to move anything to a production environment unless they have something in writing from the business owners of those applications. That's been clearly communicated to everyone within the department. So that should close that loophole.
All right, the next one is, okay,
What's the difference from page 1 to page 9?
I'm sorry?
No, on page 9, I don't know if it's a repeat or it's, page 9 is prior year. This is typically you just adding on to that year.
Maybe they'll get to it. I think they're going in order, Mike.
You know, it's just,
Yeah, it's redone.
okay.
Prior, some of this should have been rolled, carried forward.
all right, so we're on page 5, comment 13/2, financial reporting, succession planning. So our agency has taken this comment very seriously, and with our HR department, I've come up with different strategies to address this issue. So we have plans in the school district and in the central offices. And I can tell you for our office, we are required to have what we call employee engagement meetings once a month with our employees. I have one every 2 weeks with my direct reports, and they have to have one with theirs. So for example, this right here is part of my professional development. We're able to, in those engagement meetings, we're able to discuss the office business, how it's done, give the staff opportunities to ask questions, get them more involved in the overall office activities. So we have this in place, and it's checked periodically.
I think you people are good managers. The GFOA doesn't have to tell you, I guess, that it is a problem. Employee turnover can be a problem. Depends on economic conditions and whatnot, and you want to have, backup if you're able to. It's not easy.
It isn't easy, but we feel with the meetings that we're having and the engagement that we're engaging in, it's helpful, and that it does promote the employees and
You make them feel needed and wanted, I guess,
Yes.
I think is what I hear you saying. Well, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Who in the Department of Education actually prepares the financial statements and disclosures? Is that your?
This is our office. This is our office. And we did have vacancies. We have filled 4 vacancies. Matter of fact, we have Ms. Margaret Whittaker, and she is a CPA, so she's here today. And this is part of her professional development to sit at the table to see what goes on.
And were you part of the preparation this year? No. You're new? New.
She just came aboard, I think January.
She'll be all over it next year.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on this comment? So we never had. The next one is on page 8, comment 8-1, cash general school funds. So this is a prior comment, and what it is that we have reports of cash in schools greater than $300,000. So the banking unit has put into effect from the banking survey a way to identify these schools and to reach out to them and make them accountable for their spending plan.
I guess we've asked you as well before, what are the source of these funds?
Well, they're,
I mean, a GO is small, can't be much, but
yeah, they're anything that the students would have run for fundraisers. It could be for,
they have fundraisers.
trophies for
I
the
see.
athletic team. But a few schools do have exorbitant balances. But remember, some of these high schools have 5,000 children. So $5,000 at $70 per child, what's that? A day trip to Washington D.C. and back. That's what.
Is that the kind of the minimum contribution, $7
No, I was just saying.
Okay.
For the balances that are like $400,000 or $500,000, of a $5,000 population of a school, yes, they will be large. But
Have you ever had any examples of where everybody in the school went on a day trip to Washington D.C.?
No, I couldn't, but,
okay.
But I'm just
checking.
throwing out there, right. Why bigger schools will, of course, have bigger balances. In the year coming up, we will, of course, question those schools to give us particulars Although we cannot demand that they use it because it's under the auspices of the school, we don't control it, but we can question it and come up with some reasoning why are you stockpiling such large funds, for what purpose?
I guess the issue is, who can sign the checks for these funds? Is it the principal usually?
It's the principal is the held accountable for it. They also have a treasurer, a school treasurer that works with the funds, and could be one of the teachers that's assigned to the job. But they have all the separation of duties. But yes, they have the funds come in, and every 3 years in the cycle, every school is audited by our Auditor General's office going against their cash accounts.
And you have an internal audit group anyways, do they look at these things?
Yeah, our Auditor General's office.
Yeah, your Auditor General, okay.
Right, but in this case, Deloitte and Touche, they have found this finding a couple of years ago, and the school still had an excessive balance, so it's still here until we can get further clarification of these schools as to what reasoning they're giving us to have these high
But it
balances.
sounds like you're focused on if it's over 300,000.
Yeah. Yeah, just to pick a threshold.
That's your threshold.
Are all these bank accounts open in accordance with the Department of Finance regulations?
Yeah, they have to be.
And they're all reported now to Finance and the Controller's Office?
In fact, we get a listing from the Department of Finance, who gets a listing from the banks to double check what we are getting reported from our schools.
And then for the most part, they're all reported as trust and agency funds?
Yes. Yeah, I think it was close to 30 million this year, the trust and agency for the school accounts, yeah.
It's quite a bit of money in 1,000.
How many accounts roughly are there?
Approximately 1,800. We have at least one per school. Remember, with the previous administration, one building could house 3 or 4 schools in some cases, so even though it could be 1,100 physical sites, according to SEA, it's actually 1,800 potential schools each with their potentially individual accounts.
More than 1,000 schools.
Are the
Go ahead.
treasurers or the principals required to have these bank accounts reconciled every month? Does the department collect those reconciliations and review them? Or is it only when the triannual audit is done that that's reviewed?
Only when the triennial audit is there that it's presented to the OAG, but in the SOP, they're required to reconcile themselves with the principal being held accountable, yes. But there's no longer a central point where they would be sent. 20, 30 years ago, yes, they would send down these reconciliations to a banking department we used to have, 50 or 75 people whose sole job was to reconcile these.
Are there written guidelines as to what these funds may be used for?
Yes, in the SOP, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this comment?
Oh, I don't,
All right, so we're gonna move forward, we're on page 9, comment 13.3.
all right.
So this was the repeat, right?
I'm sorry?
This is the repeat.
Yeah, the only
Oh, this
difference
is the one.
was Galaxy.
Oh, yeah.
That's
So
also,
therefore, we're on page 10, 13.5, recertification of users. And we refer to our technology team on this one.
Basically, this is the same repeat of the prior one, and we'll automate this electronic review. It doesn't rely on
the same thing,
Same thing.
and you're going to do it electronically by June. Okay.
Correct.
Repeat it. Just repeat it. Mhm. So is it-
And determination for users, that's you, sir?
Yes, that's me. So in previous audits, we were cited as not removing accounts of employees who had separated. Beginning March of last year, we began a manual review of all the user accounts, and we systemically removed about 35,000 accounts of previous employees. We also worked with HR to develop a process where if a person is terminated in certain termination codes that warrant immediate removal, we'll automate that process. That should be in place by June of this year. We also are in the process of pursuing a capital plan to implement identity management, where we'll link the provisioning and deprovisioning accounts of staff directly to the HR systems to ensure that this, that permanently is resolved.
Why is it a capital plan, I guess? Or you're not using the term capital as capital versus expense, you're just calling it that?
No, it was a capital plan. We actually registered with OMB.
The capital budget is paying for it.
Right, it's infrastructure.
It's a major, it's a new system, I see.
Yes, it's a completely new system. We have about 140,000 employees.
I'm sorry?
We have about 140,000 employees, and we also
Okay.
manage accounts for 1.1 million kids. So we scaled the system sizable enough to deal with that.
All right. If it'll work. And again, you're looking to June of 2015 for this?
June of 2015 is when we'll automate the nightly feed from HR with termination clause of people who were separated for a reason. So if they were terminated for a reason, we'll remove that access immediately. Until we have the capital plan implemented, which is a 2-year project, monthly we'll run the manual job to remove accounts of people who have left service for more than 1 year. So we have a manual process that we'll run manually, we'll have an automated process with HR, and then within 2 years, the capital plan will be fully implemented, and we'll automate that.
Okay.
I guess it's worth noting, you had no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, is that correct?
That's correct.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Did you want to correct about prior year comments that have been corrected, or?
No, does anybody, if it's been corrected, it's been corrected. No, very good. I don't think there's any major issues here.
No, the only thing, again, it's just, you guys discussed it, is the
Yeah.
succession planning. Clearly, that's an integral part for the Department of Education, just because I think you need to backfill positions when they're vacated in order to prepare the financial statements.
Sure.
And the push with all the new standards and so forth, it's imperative, and that's what they're doing currently, so hopefully going forward it continues.
It is an issue, it is, but all right, I think they're dealing with it in a rational way. Thank you again all for coming and for your attention. All the best. All the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike, you want to address the grants management system? Could you introduce yourself, ma'am?
I'm Rosellen Myers, First Deputy Executive Director at FISA, and this is Richard McCarrick, our Internal Auditor at FISA.
Yeah. This grants management system, so you're able to prepare the single audit in spite of it, aren't you?
We are, but I think the issue still comes back to it's a manual process. It's a manual process that Nicole works extremely hard on trying to get information together for us. Michelle and her folks, and then it's us and George Davis. I would be remiss if I didn't. So there's a lot of people, it's a manual process, and at the end of the day, the issue is throughout the course of the year, one still has to step back and say, do you have everything accounted for? And that's the struggle, Bernie, and that's ultimately the issue that's being raised. At the end of the day, do we know we have everything? And to be honest, there's been a couple of years, as we all know who sit at the table, whereby there's been grants that have been missed. Haven't been missed, but they've popped last minute, because when we go through the reconciliation, albeit it's manual, it's very thorough and detailed, you come up with these whoopses that, we need to audit last minute. And that's one of those things that until you have an automated process and you control that process and where there's a repository of information, you're always going to run that risk. And it's a serious concern. And the reason it got elevated this year is because it's been around for quite some time. And
That's why I was
and
thinking.
the feds are looking at it now too. When they do their desk review, they actually issue a letter because the management letter has to go with the single audit when we send it to the clearinghouse. And the feds have raised it now to a level whereby they're starting to look at it as well. And everyone's working on it, but clearly it's a big project, to put it mildly, and it's going to take money.
Yeah, if I could, I mean, I guess probably both Mike and I have some responsibility for some of these older comments.
Does that make you conflicted?
But starting around 2011 or what have you, we did implement what we thought was a pilot program in the police department, which we were hoping to build upon to develop a real grants management system. So is there someone who could kind of comment on the status of where that is and what problems or where we are in trying to utilize it as a pilot program?
I believe the Office of Management Budget would be best.
Well, what I would say is that, we have the pilot program in the police department, which is somewhat unique and doesn't particularly lend itself to a citywide grants management program. We've also, in the last couple of years, developed a very robust grant management system for FEMA and HUD grants. And our experience with these programs and with this recurring finding is that, we're initiating the process. We've had significant internal discussions about developing a citywide grant management system, which, of course, is going to take a lot more than a few discussions to develop, implement, procure, develop, implement, because it's a very big job. But those discussions have started, and we've had some consultations with the Comptroller's office as well, and I expect that by this year, when this issue rolls around, we'll have a lot more to say on the topic than what I have to say today. But
Do we have any kind of written discussion document identifying what the issues and problems were with the things that we've tried?
no, per se. I mean, there aren't particular issues with the FEMA Sandy system, except that it's designed for, FEMA, HUD, and a few other disaster-related federal funding sources, and it's to the tune of maybe $14 billion over 5 to 10 years, as opposed to a lot more than that every year from many agencies, many funding sources. So it gets complicated. Once it's a fairly complicated concept if you think of grant management system for even one funding source or one entity, but when you start saying multiple funding sources, vast number of city agencies, it gets geometrically
And again,
complicated.
in full disclosure, I made all those comments in the past personally. I think we're not going to move forward until we actually define some type of deliverable.
Some type of
Deliverable, which is, we're hoping to deliver some type of document which shows these are what the issues, the problems are with either the police pilot program, the Sandy program, and what we need to do to the larger system to correct those issues. Otherwise, I'm quite comfortable we'll be punting this issue next year.
year after year.
Well, I'm saying we're not punting.
Not at all.
So you may have said that in the past. I'm saying it and meaning it. So we'll see, before the next year where we are on this.
There's no question. I'm sorry? Michelle, I didn't see you.
I think that in the past, on a couple of occasions, Deloitte has been asked, not officially, but unofficially, to help explain specifically what functionality you believe is, significant to a new system, and I think we would value that feedback.
Yeah, and
To
again,
follow
just,
up on that, because that was always a question in the past, as what is a grants management system?
And we've had kind of coffee cup conversations, as I would categorize it, but it clearly, it's a big process, but it starts with the inception of the application for the grant. It's kind of what I would refer to as cradle to grave, and that's the issue which John's alluding to, is the magnitude, the decentralization of the city, the vast agencies and departments. Sometimes you don't even know that people have applied for a grant, and once they get the monies in, OMB doesn't know. And it's starting at the inception of applying for the grant and tracking it. It's the genesis. I mean, that's ultimately where the problem resides.
The interesting thing is, because you just had school construction, it's almost like starting out on a capital project or whatever, because as soon as I do my grant application, that should be triggering some part of the process that says, well, how does that go through budget? How does that go through, the financial systems? How does that initiate the process? Even if it dies and the grant doesn't go forward, then you can have a termination for it. But, in some ways, it's not a lot different than a procurement process or anything else that says, in a procurement, I've got a purchase order, I've got somebody who's doing this. The major universities have done this in the past because they've got a lot of research people, and it's not dissimilar to the city. You can't keep track of every professor and everybody who's going out and seeking grant money to do research. But I think that's where they've kind of come down to. You've got to have something that's very similar, the thought process, not necessarily how you design it, but the thought process is, I've got an initiation document that starts something. Now, there'll be variations, because occasionally you've got the Sandys, the events that occur, or somebody in Albany or somewhere else will say, here's a particular program and we're going to bless you, or with a curse or a benefit, depending upon how you look at the program. But I think the concepts are the same in terms of that tracking process that you would track through. Again, variations, but that would be my thought process in terms of how we lay it out.
And that's not all automated either. That requires actual bodies. That's the other part of the equation. I mean, it's not just a fully automated, but it requires bodies to manage that process. So there's a lot of interaction amongst the system and personnel.
Universities tend to have a department, a bureau, or whatever, that everything funnels through. And until it funnels through there, the university's not going to do their match, not going to do their process, because it's very much they got to have a choke point, because they know people run wild. And it's not that people in the city run wild, it's just you have so many different pieces that have the ability to do this.
It was also staying on top of it for the expenditures as people move around within the organization.
Right.
I guess the issue I was going to raise is, assuming the world was great and you got the system off the ground, where would it reside? Where would the grants management system reside?
That's
Controller,
a management decision.
OMB?
I would say OMB.
You would say, that's what I was
Where else would
thinking,
it
yeah.
reside?
Because you got the
What I was
matching
gonna ask-
aspect and everything like that.
Most of them reside in a budget process, because you've got to have the match.
Okay.
You've got to have the appropriations that go along with
The expenditure.
this money that you're being given, because if you don't have the appropriate match and the appropriate appropriation, then you're in violation of the grant.
Sure.
So that's where a lot of them
all right.
reside. Now, there has to be a direct link over to the accounting system,
Yes,
obviously.
of
To
course.
prove actual expenditures and
Right.
everything. So there would have to be an interface with FMS if it's not an FMS component.
Right.
Does the state have a single audit? I guess they do.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. And what is the major federal expenditure there? Medicaid? You don't know?
Medicaid is probably the biggest one, but, because that's
Because I
typically
think
the
you're
biggest
double
one in every
counting
state.
the Medicaid expenditures here. I think they're double counting the Medicaid expenditures here. About 30 years ago, the state instituted a system which helped the city immeasurably, the MMIS system. Before that, when you had Medicaid, you had to carry the state, the federal, and the city money. If the reimbursements were slow, you had to do seasonal borrowings. You went crazy. So the state, in their infinite wisdom, gave the city a break. They said, we will bill you just for your share. Now, to take that program where they're only billing you for your share and blow it up as if they had state and federal money, which is never flowing through, somehow I think that's not correct. In the state, it's different, because the state runs the program. Feds don't give a damn about the city. They work through the state. The state may set the reimbursement rates if they want to, like the governor, the current Governor Cuomo, did a whole management redesign program which saved the feds lots of money, killed the city. You know, health and hospitals saved the feds a lot of money, and now they're coming up with a new program to give back some of it. The way they give it back, it could be a lot easier, but that's another story. I really think it's wrong to blow it up in this, on the city's single audit when those funds never flow through you being the controller. And if you want to do it in the state, I could understand. I mean, I think the total program in the city got to be about $5 billion in city funds, something like that. In the state, it's got to be like $50 billion. So these are big numbers, and I think it has to be handled a little differently. I wonder, I'm surprised, I mean, in the federal government, you're saying they're asking questions. Medicaid program is a major program throughout the country. I would think they would question some of these things. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Bernie, I just want to point out that about 12 or 13 years ago, very much at the beginning of Deloitte's tenure as our auditors, the New York State single auditors had asked the question about the Medicaid funding,
Sure.
and how it was reported. And after extensive discussions with the state and some inquiries of the federal government, we concluded that we are accounting for it correctly.
So you figured you had to report the total?
Yeah.
I think they're wrong. I mean, it's just I really think they're wrong.
You know, this is a huge task, and, you know, I mean.
Oh, it's a terrible.
And when you really think about it, New York City, you know, you're obviously, it's a bigger task for New York City than it is for all but the state of New York, the state of California, a handful of states, because of the size of the city. That's the reality of the task. That also, though, is the reason that the inspector generals, the feds look at you, because you are as large as you are. I mean, that's the plus and the minus of this whole thing. It's you know, you get a lot of money in, and you know, their accountability, and as they're looking at the federal dollars and how that shifts around, they have questions, obviously. And this is complicated because you get not only direct money from the federal government, but it comes through the state, it comes through from other places. And sometimes, and some of the problems we run into is it comes in and it starts out looking like state money, and then suddenly it miraculously morphs into federal money. You know, it's and so when you build a system, you know, it probably has to look at state and federal.
Yeah, in fairness, the state often comes back and retroactively
Sure, I know.
reclassifies their money as federal money.
I know.
That is not the city's
No,
fault.
and they've done that, and we've all dealt with it.
I'm not saying it is your problem. I mean, it just happens, you know.
And the ironic part is also, the state knows the numbers, and yet when you try to confirm with the state to make certain that everyone's in line, you don't get any help. Same thing with the federal government, because we've all collectively tried to do that, help one another, but no one wants to play nice in the sandbox, for better terms. But there's been years, where they've coded it to FEMA. Now, once you code it to FEMA or ARA, as Michelle's alluding to, then it becomes a major program. And we're scrambling in the last minute. We've done, and George can attest to, in March, we've done major programs because the state changed the classification. Yet you go back to the email correspondence with the state, and it's frustrating as anything. They originally said it's state money.
So when you build a system, you've got to design it to grab that too and track that, just in case it does change. But anyway, you know,
it's difficult.
This is a problem. You know, I mean, it's a point. You know, it's a point that I think is a continual focus, and I think you are focusing on it. It would have to be a continual focus because obviously it's a big item that goes through the financial statements, and it's an important set of reports. So.
What would the estimated cost of a system today be?
Good question.
And what would the annual upkeep be?
Good question.
That's
Glad you brought it up.
chances are you could get reimbursement from them for the upkeep, I would think.
Not likely.
No.
Not necessarily?
Not likely. The administrative cost in most of the grounds is capped.
They wouldn't pay for it?
You're already hitting the caps on the ones that have.
All of the caps they have are way too low.
Yeah.
They have lots of crazy rules.
Right.
And then that are extremely complicated and costly, and they expect you to do it fast.
Yeah.
And
Extremely unpleasant area of government.
I guess I'm gonna go back through the cycle that we've done with this.
Bud, you were gonna say that?
That we went through, for example, the police as a pilot to identify issues and problems. Do we have some document that says what those issues and problems are? Because the problem with this has been all along, is it's huge, it's very expensive, and are you willing to spend the amount of money to do this to get the benefit that you need out of it? And the part of looking at it was to define what really needed to happen so that we could estimate some costs and then basically say it's either worth it or not.
The issue with the police department system is it's so specific to that particular set of funding sources and culture, which, for example, if you're getting grants to buy lots of anti-terrorist activity, fund activity and buy equipment, they don't really want to turn it into a big transparent example for everybody to look at and evaluate. So that's one issue with that system. So it's not a particularly good example of something that can serve as a model. I mean, you could look at our Sandy system and look at that, and actually SCA has a grant management system, and we've started looking at that. So we're looking at these examples, but the police department system is not a particular good example. I mean, it's probably a good start for the first one that we did, and it was good to look at, but it has issues, unique characteristics, and I would say issues that make it not a particular good example for looking at something that you can use generally. I would recommend, of the things we have in-house at OMB, our quick pay system for Sandy-related federal funding grants is probably a better example.
Well, that's exactly what I'm talking about, is that was done, we've used it for a couple of years as kind of a pilot. We identified some issues and problems. We went off and built some other offline tracking systems. So trying to find out where we are in that process as far as identifying which of them works, how big, and has anybody kind of rolled out an estimate of what it would really cost to build and to fix some of those issues.
Bernard, can I suggest that management come back to the audit committee, let's say by June, with an update as to what's going on?
Sure, we can, oh, that's fine, I was just gonna ask the Deloitte auditors again. I think you implied that most of the single audits are done on a state level, or some of the cities?
No. Everybody that gets federal money.
Of a certain amount is subject to it.
Yes, unfortunately, and that threshold keeps rising, but, you just happen to be one of the largest.
Yeah.
Because of the nature, because it's a city.
And I just wonder if they've built grant management systems, some of the cities. I think the states would have had to, but I just wonder if the cities would have had to.
Well, last time I looked.
I'm sorry?
Last time I looked, the New York City operating budget was third largest in the country, excluding the federal government.
Sure.
So that would be, California, New York State, New York City.
And California doesn't have one.
New York State only because we're in it.
Yeah, New York State only because we're in it.
Just to be clear.
Yeah.
What did she say? I missed that.
She said that New York State only has one of the largest budgets because New York City is part of it.
That's right. They're not a bargain, the state, believe me. But I guess, it seems to me that the issue of cost is, something to consider. And it's all right for an inspector general in the federal government, to criticize, but unless he's crazy or drunk or blind, he must know with the plethora of grants, it can't be easy.
But you gotta remember, an inspector general is coming in from a department perspective. They've got blinders on.
Yeah, no, I know.
If I'm from transportation,
He's a
I
shoe
care about
fly.
transportation. I don't care about anybody else.
That's,
If
oh, I
I'm
know.
HUD, I care about HUD. I don't care about anybody else. I mean, the other thing that I guess you can always look at and should be looked at as part of this is, are there other benefits that come from having a system? Does it improve the ability to cash flow this? Are there reimbursements that you're entitled to that get hung up because you can't do reporting as fast as
That's a good point.
as a department should? You know, are there tangential things that happen that, you know, at least give you a one-time result that would help, you know, offset some of the big cost, because it is a big cost, and it's a big training cost too, because you'd have to train everybody in every department and every user. But those are the things that, as part of this, you know, and if you go through a complete analysis and say, well, you had a complete analysis and this just isn't feasible, then this point maybe can go away just because it's not feasible. I still think it's a valid point, and I think there's benefits to be derived. But the problem in doing these kinds of things is, you know, we often look at it and say it's big, and it's a problem without all thinking out of the box in terms of what are the other benefits that may flow out of doing this. And I don't know, you know, I haven't thought through it enough to know, Bernie, to be honest.
No, I
Glenn and I were having a conversation about that just now.
But that's part of my point is
Yeah.
that I think that some parts of what we're asking for here may be so expensive, so big, that it's never going to be done. And if we can do the analysis, it shows what it's really going to cost, what we can do, what steps we can take that's actually going to make a positive benefit.
Right.
It might be better to do those midterm,
To do the
reasonable things,
Right.
and then come out and say, yeah, the quote best practices is just so monumentally expensive
Right.
that we don't get the benefit that you're suggesting, if that's the outcome. But I would think that might be potentially an appropriate answer, rather than just saying we're going to build it each year.
But just to follow up, is it doable to come back with some type of report?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, so who would be responsible to give the update? I mean, we can always have our auditors, they're fine, but
Bernie,
you wanna come back?
I'd be happy to give the update at our June meeting.
It's the school.
In the June meeting?
Yeah,
Very good.
and just let me, you know, members have asked a variety of questions, you know, how much will it cost? What will it include? How long will it take? And, you know, I don't have any answers to any of those questions, but I can give you my opinion of how this might go. Like I suspect that this might have to be something that, based on, you know, the thinking that we've done, the examples that we've looked at, is that because it's such a large-scale project that if you tried to design and build and implement a one-size-fits-all system at this moment, by the time you got done implementing it, it would be time to start redesigning it. So my suspicion is that we might end up doing what I would call kind of a segmented development and rollout, because I think that there are areas of this where it's much easier to reap the benefits fast than others. For example, you know, if you get a grant to buy a police department a helicopter, you know, the grant management on that's not so difficult, because you can take the auditor out to Floyd Bennett Field and say, there it is, and you open up the drawer and you pull out the receipt and you say, Bell Helicopters, $5 million, here's the canceled check, end of story. If it's a service delivery type grant where you're trying to track units of service delivery in a human services area or a school area like special ed, you know, and the special ed student goes to the nurse's office, it's a unit of service delivery that's eligible for grant reimbursement. You know, does the kid have to punch in, get a receipt, give it to somebody? How's the data collected? How's it stored? Is the nurse's office trained to capture data? Is the school bus driver delivering special ed students to and from school doing data capture on that eligible expense? So there's a range of grants that we receive in the city, and there's a range of facility with which the data capture in terms of eligible activity or expense or expenditure can be captured. And my guess is that once we study this, we'll come to some sense of a segmented design, development, and delivery of a grant management program. But that's just my opinion at this time, having spent, I'm not a total expert on this topic, understand, right? So, but we're thinking about it, and we're planning to move forward with some action plan that involves, more study and thought and development. And I'm happy to give an update on our process and progress in June.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think it's also, I don't expect in June much more than this is what we reviewed to date, these are the steps we've taken. I don't think we're looking for any kind of conclusions at that point, just show that the ball's being moved forward and we're evaluating what needs to be done.
And what are all the issues?
I'm sorry?
And what are all the issues?
I mean, not all the issues, but at least list of some of the significant issues.
I guess in concluding this, the response to this comment, discussion of this comment, I would say it's really nice that FISA's here. Because I think they're going to be a very big part of the solution. So,
We want it cheap.
Oh, yeah, that's what we do best,
fast
right?
and perfect. Should we move on? Should we move on?
Okay. All right, thank you, John. If we can have something like, there's just so many grants, and there's just so many agencies, and it's almost like different fiefdoms in the federal government. I mean, no matter what you say about the Inspector General, that son of a gun knows it, but he's going to make it hard for you, right? He knows it. He knows it better than you and I do. All right. Maybe it's a she, I don't know.
Should we move on?
Yeah, the accrued real estate tax refunds. Michelle, did you want to handle that, or?
Well, maybe the auditors want to mention what the issue is.
Bernie, there was a disconnect. There was kind of a timing difference as to how the accrual was calculated. We're fine with it. We quantified it. It's not material to the financial statement.
No, that I did.
Management's working. We spoke with them throughout. It's going to be fixed, or
It's
it is
gonna be
addressed
fixed.
already.
All right. And on the allowance, you also said it wasn't material.
Correct. It's just more of going back and looking at the methodology used to calculate it. Management understands. They're looking into it to make certain, and we agree with the response. And we've
So hopefully it won't come up in the audit again.
It should not.
And the missing bank reconciliations, I guess.
Again, I mean, there are closing instructions every year. Management does their best to follow up. However, you still have departments and agencies that ultimately do not prepare them timely. It causes issues, and you can see based upon sign-off dates, et cetera. But there's been sterner emails and notices sent out, and that's the best we can hope for, but there will be follow-up this year.
Okay.
And Jackie, we can keep on top of this, and if escalation is necessary, we can try and bring these to.
And the terminated users, I mean, that's
You find
that's
that,
the
I mean,
standard.
that's a common standard comment.
Yeah,
but again,
that's a
it's
standard comment. Get them all.
remediated and fixed.
Sure.
That's just given the size of the city, Bernie. I mean, it happens.
No, it's gonna happen. We have a FISA comment here. User access, the same thing, user, get them off, okay, all right. They still have the camera system? If it's been around a long time?
Yes.
Maybe it needs some work, I don't know. I'm not familiar.
That would be another management letter comment if it wasn't working properly.
Yeah, I don't know, I mean,
You rely on that system for the financials, so.
We do have some oldies but goodies.
those appraisals,
The other comments, Bernie, are just repeat, and it's
no,
to the size of the city, and I mean,
Yeah,
there's nothing egregious. but
it's like Jim has said, given the size of this government, these are not serious comments for the most part,
They're observations, right?
Yeah, they're not.
And you know, as I've said in the past, in all of my years of doing government, you know, this is not a large letter, given the size of the city of New York and the kind of entity it is. I've had departments where we had management letters that were as, you know, as thick as this stack of all these reports, and you know, those were more interesting discussions. But for the kind of city, you know, for the city of New York, third largest, you know, this is not a significant number of observations. Now, we are working on, and this is not a management letter, this is sort of an other comments. In the old days, accounting firms used to do a lot of you know, kind of observations that are positive observations. When I say positive, nobody ever thinks of auditors as saying positive observations. No, they're business kinds of comments, other kinds of things that are not deficiencies. It's not necessarily a letter of recommendations. It's things to think about, you know. And in the old days, we called those management letters, because those really were, you know, constructive service comments, I guess is the term that some of us learned a long time ago. And we're working on one of those. We just don't have it finished yet. And that's where some things, you know, may look like old management letter points, but recast into constructive service comments. And so you know, that will come to you in a subsequent meeting.
And one of them will be on grants management.
And one of them won't be grants management. It might be, though, more like the comments on developing succession plans, for example. Because that reality that's everywhere. You know, that is government, you know, and government has succession issues at times, as you've observed. So there'll be other kinds of comments.
All right, then. So maybe, do we still want to go through everything, or?
No, I thought we did.
I don't think so. Okay, all right. All right, thank you again for all your help on the audit. We've had,
Given the marks up here, I mean, that's...
do we need an executive session?
No, we don't need an executive session, we just need an adjournment.
Okay.
And you may want to announce there's another meeting.
Yeah, no,
there's another meeting next week.
Yeah.
And that one will include an executive session.
Yeah, that will need, it's quite an agenda too, I think, and it'll be difficult for the people preparing the minutes, I guess, to get them done for next week, but I wish you luck. All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
Okay, thank you all, thanks. Got a couple of people or something.